Hello all, welcome to Impact Salesforce Saturday. And today's session, we have our speaker, Sudha Sundaram ma'am over here. Good morning, ma'am. So she is a 11 into Salesforce certified application architect and a co-founder of Salesforce Couple. She has 12 plus years of experience in the Salesforce and the Agile space. So coming to Sudha ma'am, she has great leadership skills and has strong technical expertise with the Salesforce. She is also great in delivering the Salesforce projects and has an immense knowledge in Salesforce.com. She has earned amazing accolades from the executives. Welcome, ma'am, to the Impact Salesforce Saturday by New Delhi Salesforce Developer Group. I am Divya V, today's host for the Impact Salesforce Saturday session, and I am a student from Vigyan Bharati Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. You can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn as well from the given. Today, we New Delhi Salesforce Developer Group are happy to see the strength for today's session. You can use the provided social media links and can feel free to reach to us if you have any queries or if you are interested in attending the meetings hosted by our community. Impact Salesforce Saturday is a series of online Salesforce Saturday sessions, a program run by New Delhi Salesforce Developer Group, where we run knowledge sharing virtual sessions. And coming to Talent Central is meant for those who are looking for jobs in the Salesforce ecosystem, where companies and students can register on this Talent Central portal and can find each other. Here we have our success stories by Talent Central. Here are some of our volunteers as well who have joined the Talent Central and got placed in the UST Global, and we are happy for that. And for Let's Implement, this is one of the initiatives by New Delhi Salesforce Developer Group. Here students can map and learn concepts with real business problems with the help of seasoned community contributors. This program, Let's Implement, enables students to gain knowledge through well-structured session and implement the learned skills to real business cases. Coming to Journey to Salesforce, you will learn on Trailhead, which is self-paced platform. Find the related trail mixes in admin and developer as well. You can find n number of Salesforce professionals near you who can guide you through your journey. Journey to Salesforce is run by Salesforce Developer Relations, and to join, you have the provided Telegram link, and you can join using the link. And these are our top contributors to the New Delhi Salesforce Developer Group, and they are very active and contributing to the group. Thank you so much for the contributors as well. And you can follow our channels provided. We have our New Delhi website, Mentorship Central, YouTube channel where you can visit the previous session recordings, and you have Twitter, LinkedIn, and Telegram links as well. And thank you to our sponsors, Cloud Bandhana and Grey Opus. Thank you so much. And Sudha ma'am, over to you. You can proceed with your session.
Thank you, Divya, for the great introduction, and kudos to the entire New Delhi user group team for doing all the awesome work you do for the Trailblazer community. Let me know once you see my screen. Divya or Sushant, can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on a weekend between your relaxing schedules, taking some time to learn. Thank you all for joining. A little about me. Divya already gave a quick introduction. I just wanted to take just a minute for another introduction about myself. So I'm Sudha Sundaram. I have 12 plus years of experience predominantly in the Salesforce and the Agile space. Over the last decade, I've coached several organizations in their Agile journey, pretty much more in the Salesforce implementation space itself. I'm a certified Scrum professional, Scrum Master, and a PMI Agile certified professional. I also hold 11 Salesforce certifications, including application architect. I'm also a co-founder of a website called Salesforce Couple, where we host a lot of Salesforce and Agile blog. So if you're new to Salesforce and you're trying to learn new Salesforce concepts, or if you're looking to, plug in your business scenarios with the best out of the box solutions and you want to test your knowledge there, or if you want to read about Agile and its relevance in the Salesforce world, you can go ahead and look at our website and subscribe as well. Here are my LinkedIn and Twitter handles. If you'd like to follow me, please feel free to. So in today's session, I'm going to cover a few areas. It's pretty short session, right? I mean, in Agile is a pretty vast space. So I'm going to try my best to cover pretty much in detail about when do we use Agile and when do we use Waterfall. Brief introduction to Scrum, how the Scrum works, how the Scrum rules work, and what are the Scrum ceremonies, and a little bit about the Scrum framework as well. And then we look at a real story when Salesforce as a company actually met Agile. And then we will take a deep dive into how do we create good user stories, how do we prioritize and estimate them. So before I get started, I just wanted to lay down some ground rules. One, it's a request from me. If you, instead of just sharing slides on social medias, if you could go ahead and share some learnings that you take away from today's session, that would be great. I highly recommend you sharing your learnings, some key takeaways from today's session. It could be from any of my slides, but just try to write briefly about what's your takeaway or what's your key learning from today's session. I think that takes more value and influence over just sharing the slides itself. And there's going to be, there's going to be a bit of interaction through today's session. And whenever there are interactions, I highly encourage you to go and use the chat window to drop what your thoughts and perspectives are. There is no wrong answer. I am looking forward to hear each of your thoughts and your perspectives as we talk through concepts. All right, so let's get started. So the first, I'm going to start with a small interaction piece. I would like to listen from you all. What does Agile mean to you? So every time you hear the word Agile or someone talks to you about Agile, what is the immediate thing that comes to your mind? Go ahead and put it in the chat window. Again, like I mentioned, there is no wrong answer. Feel free to say what Agile means to you. Harsh says continuous development. Shashank says quickly and easily. Britti says continuous improvement. Priyadarshini says move quick. Iterative and quick. Adaptability. Fast turnaround. Awesome. Development in iterations. Iterative and incremental. Small dev plan over a week or two. Software models responding to change. Continuous changes. Fast development process. Building software incrementally from the start of the project. Wow, pretty awesome inputs. Thank you all so much. Easy development, managing things on the run, fast go-to-market. Agile software development refers to a group of software development methodologies based on iterative development. Agile is a mindset. Thank you, Murli. Yeah, thank you all. I mean, these are all awesome inputs and you're making my life more easier. So I'm going to summarize what you all told me, all the great inputs that given me with my inputs as well plugged in together. So Agile is merely not a methodology. It's more a mindset. It's basically a culture that we implement across the company. So it's basically a complete mind shift from how we deliver products in the traditional way all along. And when I say mind shift, I'm trying to target a few things here. So when I say agile mindset or the mind shift from the traditional way, it is a mindset wherein we welcome different perspectives and diversity of ideas and thoughts. So we all share different expertise. We all share different skill sets. All our perspectives and ideas and thoughts are the reflection of what we have seen in our past, right? So we're going to welcome all of that. That's the first and foremost mind shift. And then we also learn from our past mistakes and improve, right? So all of us are human. We all make mistakes. We all try to, improve as we progress, right? So it's okay to make mistakes, but then it's what's very important to learn from the mistakes and improve as a team. We also learn to accept changes and adapt to them quickly. And I think I can't find a more relevant time than it is today, because we are in the middle of a pandemic for more than like a year. And what we have seen over the last year and a half right now is everything has changed, right? The way the businesses are done are changed, the way the customer sell have changed, the way we buy things have changed, the way we work has changed. A lot of us operate remotely, right? We are working like a distributor teams, we're all working out of our homes. So everything, a lot of things have changed around us. The world is really changing very fast. And what is the best way to deal with changes is to accept the changes and adapt to them quickly. The sooner we adapt, the sooner we succeed, right? The mind shift also is for our teams to be more transparent, right? It's very important that we all have mutual respect for each other. We trust each other and we're transparent with each other, because it's very critical for the success of the team. So whether it is success or failures, we are open about it. And this is very, very important mindset, right? Because we are trying to work together as a team and succeed as a team. So it's very important that we are transparent with each other. And the teams are also self-managing. So you'll keep hearing this terminology in a lot of the Agile spaces, in your work, outside, when you're trying to learn about Agile, you keep hearing this. The team should be self-managing. So what does self-managing really means? It means that as a team, we are not order takers. Nobody comes and tells us like, hey, Sudha, you need to pick up this user story and develop this. Or they don't come and say, hey, Sushant, you need to pick up this user story and do the validation for it. So no one does. We are self-managing. What it means is we have different skill sets. We're basically a cross-functional team. So we all have different skill sets. Like one person could be great at coding, one person could be great at configuration, one person could be great at architecture and design, another person could be great at validation. So we all have different skill sets and we're cross-functional team, right? So we decide who should work on what, how we accomplish it, right? So it's self-managing. So we are not order takers, but more we are self-managing. We are accountable for what we are doing. And it's also a mind shift, which is very important. Again, is like our teams continuously communicate and collaborate, and we all share knowledge freely. It's very important that we are willing to share knowledge with each other, because we all, again, come with different expertise, right? So we could have had past learning. So it's very important that we are all willing to communicate, collaborate, and share knowledge freely. This is where earlier point I said becomes more valid, because when we share mutual respect and trust for the team, then what happens is the communication becomes much more easier, because we're all willing to talk to each other and share knowledge, right? Another important aspect in the Agile mindset, and I feel generally it's not just in the Agile mindset, but it's applicable for any work environment, is our teams are happy and they're having fun. Right? It's very, very important all of us are happy at work, because every day we spend most of our day at work, and every day when we get up in the morning, we should look forward to go to work and work as a team. Even if a single day we get up and we feel like, oh, I don't feel like going to work, or I don't want to work with the team, what's going to happen is our morale is going to go down. We're not going to be able to work productively. And it's actually going to affect the team's performance as well as our own satisfaction and happiness, right? It's very important that, the teams are happy and they're having fun at work and outside work as well. And finally, the mindset is also where the work pace is very sustainable. So the speed at which we are doing work, it shouldn't become like we set a pace where it's like super fast that we are finishing our work so quickly and then we get bored. Or it shouldn't become like we're all overworked and, end of the day, we are tired and we are not able to be very productive because there's constantly, a lot of work coming our way, right? So what happens when we do this Agile mindset, right? What happens when the mind shift happens from the traditional way? We're able to deliver high business values incrementally, sooner and faster, with a high quality, right? And a safer delivery. So when I say safer delivery, what I mean here is it's a smooth delivery without bigger shocks in production. So nobody likes bigger shocks in production, right? Neither the customer nor do us, because we have built something so long in the sprints. So we want the delivery to be smooth, nothing to be broken down big in the production. Even the customer, they want everything to be smooth. So the end users can have, happy time with the application and they don't have huge hiccups, right? So it's very important to have the Agile mindset to get to all the successes. We're also able to innovate as we progress and deliver satisfactory products, incorporating consistent feedbacks. So innovation becomes the key in any of the product success. If we all want to innovate as we keep building things and keep improving it, right? So it's very important, again, as part of Agile, like a lot of you rightly said in the chat, innovation and incorporating consistent feedbacks is one of the key things that we succeed in Agile, with the Agile mindset. And like I mentioned earlier, it's very important that through this process, the teams are happy and eventually our customers will be happy. So I'm going to get a little bit out of the IT world, and I'm going to talk about waterfall versus agile. So technically, when do we use waterfall and when do we use agile, right? There is no one size fits all. Like whatever could fit your need and whatever could fit my need may be different because our needs are different, right? So the traditional waterfall methodology can still be a fit for some of the programs and organization depending on their parameters. So if someone tells you, it's the buzzword agile, so let's go the agile way. Most likely they're going to say this to the customer, not technically to us. But there are also a lot of companies who actually say, let's take the agile path because my competitors are taking the agile path. That's not really the way to go about it because each company operates differently. Their programs are organized differently. It's good to go and look at the parameters to say which works best for me. So let's take this as an example. We are going to renovate a kitchen. So let's see, when do we renovate a kitchen in the waterfall way and when do we renovate kitchen in the agile path? So I'm taking this non-IT example to make it a little more simpler and kind of break it down so it's easier to relate and understand, right? So say, for example, I exactly know which appliances I need for my kitchen, right? Like the brand, what dimensions I need, what pattern of appliances I need. And I've already decided like my colors of my cabinets, my cooktop, like my shelves, the wall. I'm pretty much clear about what I really need for my kitchen renovation. And say my budget is also fixed. Now the work is very predictable and the outcome is already known, right? Say, for example, I have received an estimate from my renovation company and they are telling me that it might take 3 months for them to finish with a complete renovation. And they are telling me I'll not be able to use my kitchen for 3 months. Okay, and I'm okay with it. I'm fine not using my kitchen for 3 months. Say my mom is just 2 blocks away. I can just go and get my food from there. I really don't have to cook at my kitchen. So I'm fine with it, right? So this typically fits very well with the waterfall, right? It operates in phases. So again, this is very familiar in your IT world as well. So you would have seen these are the phases in waterfall. So like requirements, design, implementation, verification, deployment, and maintenance, right? So the requirements get logged at the end of requirements phase, design at the end of design phase, and so on. And what happens is changes to them cannot be incorporated after they're being signed off. So after the requirements are signed off, to incorporate a change is a bit of a task, right? In waterfall, it's not, you usually have that kind of a stringent process there. So because of which, what happens is there's a very limited room for innovation and feedbacks. Okay. So now let's look what happens at the end of 3 months when my kitchen renovation is done. There are 2 possible scenarios. One, a very happy scenario, wherein like I walk into my kitchen, I absolutely love it because I exactly knew what I wanted and I exactly see what I wanted. So I'm going to be very happy that, oh, wow, it was worth waiting for 3 months. I got exactly what I wanted and this is good. It fits my budget as well. Or there is another scenario, which most likely might not happen because I knew the outcome, but I'm going to throw it out there because it's another possible scenario, right? After 3 months, if I'm not happy with an appliance or a color, it's really hard for me to change and there'll be extra time and budget that will be needed to be kept aside for the changes. So what could happen is it might leave me a little disappointed. Again, this is just another possible scenario, but most likely because I knew my outcome and it was all predictable, I could just be very happy by the way my kitchen has turned out. Now let's see, when do we do the agile way, right? When do we take the agile way? Say I want to renovate my kitchen iteratively. I do not wish to wait for 3 months and I want to start using it as soon as a part of it is built. My MVP is clear. When I say MVP, the minimum viable product, right? What's the minimum that I need for me to start functioning, right? And I also want to provide consistent feedback and I want to keep, innovating as things are getting built. Say, for instance, like I want my cooktop and chimney to be ready first so that I can start cooking, right? Then I want my refrigerator so that I can store my vegetables, milk, fruits, ice creams, and whatnot. Next critical item for me is my sink area and my slab, followed by my cabinet and shelves. So if you notice here, my MVP is clear. I have a list of prioritized items saying I want this first, I want this second, this third, this fourth, and this fifth. So while I start cooking and I notice that I may need a longer slab, I can always incorporate it right? So right now we have designed it this way, but only my first item is built and I feel I need a longer slab because I'm going to add one more appliance, right? Can always incorporate it in Agile. If I feel I would love a nice wallpaper, which might make my kitchen look more beautiful, I can always ask my designer to add it to the list of items as well. So if you notice here, what's happening through Agile is we're able to accommodate new ideas and learning, which will certainly make me very happy with the end results. And not to forget, I get to use my kitchen through this process as and when an item is ready. I don't have to wait for the full complete or like 3 months like I did it in the waterfall. Moving on. So there are a variety of different approaches or framework based on Agile values and principles, right, which has been set out in the Agile Manifesto. We would have heard about Scrum, extreme programming, Crystal method, scaled Agile framework, etc. Right? You would have heard all of these terminologies here and there. So again, there is no one size fits all. So we can choose the frameworks like how we choose whether to go the waterfall or the Agile way based on many factors and parameters. So usually what happens is we assess a lot of conditions or parameters in which our programs are running, and then the framework is being picked. For the benefit of time, in today's session, we will focus primarily on the most successful and widely used framework, Scrum. So I'm not going to talk about any of the other framework. From now on till the end of the session, it's all going to be about Scrum. So just to give a little bit of a background, right? Scrum was founded on empiricism and lean thinking, right? Which believes, so when I say empiricism, what it means is it believes that the knowledge comes from experience and we make decisions on what we observe. Right? So it's from our experience is what we gain knowledge, and we are going to keep improvising going on based on our experience and our learnings, right? And lean thinking eliminates waste and it focuses on what is important. So if something is not important, we are not going to focus on it. So that's what lean thinking means. So Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. So what it does is it employs an iterative incremental approach, like a lot of you rightly said on the chat, to optimize predictability, and it controls risks. So it emphasizes on three things, right? One is like it emphasizes on transparency in communication, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's success or failures. And we are very transparent about it. And we create an environment of collective accountability and continuous progress, because that's what our aim is all about, right? It engages a group of people who collectively have all skills and expertise to do the work and share or acquire such skills whenever needed. So the three pillars of the Scrum are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. These are the very important three pillars because that's what we keep using for the success of Agile. The success of Scrum depends on people becoming more proficient in living the 5 values, which I have listed on my slide here. One is commitment, basically the commitment to achieve goals and support each other. Second is focus. You're going to focus on the work of the sprint to make the best possible progress. The third is being open, right? We're being open about the work and challenges. The fourth is respect. Like I mentioned earlier, we carry mutual respect for each other, because without mutual respect and trust, we're not going to be open about our issues or successes for that matter. The final one is courage. It's the courage to do the right thing and to work on the tough problems. Yeah, after a bit of that introduction about what Scrum is and a little bit about what principles it was founded on and what the pillars and the values are, I'm going to ask you a question. Whom do you think are part of the Scrum team? So when I say the Scrum Squad, whom do you think are part of this Scrum Squad? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Scrum Master, testers, developers, everyone. Product owner, Scrum Master, developer, tester, product owners, business users, project members, everyone. Awesome. Thank you all for your inputs. So the Scrum team comprises of a product owner, Scrum Master, and the developers, right? They're typically a team of 10 or fewer. So they work together towards the common product goal. That's what we're going to work together for. So I'm going to give you a little bit background about each of these roles and how they come into play. So the first and foremost is the product owner, right? The product owner is responsible for the product backlog and prioritization. So I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit about the product backlog itself. So what is a product backlog, right? This is where the vision and the product goal of the customer is coming to life, right? Because that's how we are translating them. So the product owner sits down across with the customer and then tries to understand the vision, and then he or she tries to understand the, what the product goal is, what are they trying to achieve, and then starts noting it down in forms of epics, features, and user stories. So just to give you a bit of an example so you understand the concept much more easier, say for example, a customer is looking to optimize their customer service. So that's one of their broader goals, right? So then what happens is the epic is the larger goal, which is your customer service optimization, right? So then the product owner starts discussing with the customer and asks like, okay, I understand you want to optimize your customer service. What are the key things that you're looking for? What are the key features, right? And then as they discuss and they come to a point where they're saying, we want efficient case management. We want the tool to have the ability to manage cases for the customer service agent. So every time they receive a call, the entire case flow is managed in a particular tool. And they say, we also want the ability to do like a knowledge base where we have frequently asked questions. There are a lot of knowledge articles so that the people can go and self-service. When they have a question, they can go and see if the question has already been asked and if answers are available for them. And say there was another feature where they wanted the customer service agents to collaborate with each other. They want some feature like that. So all of these are for customer service optimization, which is a larger goal, your epic, and each of these becomes a feature. So your case management is one feature, your knowledge article being built is another feature, your collaboration of your customer service team could be another feature. So as the product owner starts grooming each of these features with the stakeholders, what happens is the user stories come to life, right? So the user stories are the granular requirements, okay, the granular stories which are trying to achieve for each of these features. So for example, take case management as a feature. Your user stories could be any field that you're putting on the case page layout, anything that to do with the case flow itself. If there is any case escalation, there is anything like case assignment or any process that's being involved, right? All that gets into a single user story of the feature, right? You break them into as smaller logical pieces as possible and create user stories. So all these are called product backlog items, your epic, your features, your user stories, all these are product backlog items. So the product owner ensures the team understands these product backlog items. So all of us, if you're working together as a team for this particular program, then we need to understand what is expected out of each of this user story. What is that, the broader picture? What are we, letting the customer along with us achieve the product goal for, right? So trying to understand the full pieces and nuances of it. So the product owner ensures we all understand the product backlog items, by which it also means product owners are responsible for maximizing the value of the product itself. So moving on, the next main role is a Scrum Master, who is also the true leader, right? The Scrum Master serves the Scrum team and the larger organization. The Scrum Master ensures that the Scrum is adopted well, right? So if you have any question, you're new, completely new to Agile, you're completely new to the Scrum framework itself, the Scrum Master will help us and guide us and coach or mentor us through it. Scrum Master also is responsible for facilitating the ceremonies. So ceremonies are like your Scrum events, that is, it's also called that way, like your sprint planning, your retrospective, your your sprint review, or your daily stand-ups, right? So all these are the ceremonies or the Scrum events. Scrum Master is also responsible for removing any impediments for delivering the committed product. So if you foresee any risk or anything that is like in your way of for achieving a particular user story, your go-to person is your Scrum Master, and go immediately, don't waste time. So he or she is going to help you, help remove the impediments. So the next main group of people who are part of the Scrum Squad is the developers. So when I say developers, I urge you not to think they are people who code or config. No. When I say developers, these are product developers. So any skill set that is responsible for the product delivery itself, right? They are developers. So it could be, if you think of skill sets, it could be anyone with development skill set, meaning like your coding, configuring, testing, integration, whatnot, right? Anything that you need for the product to be delivered successfully. So these are the developers. Do not confuse that with your technical development terminology. This means anybody who is responsible for developing the product itself. So the primary responsible for the developers is to deliver potentially shippable increments of done product at the end of each sprint, right? So basically you have stories that you will pick up at the starting of the sprint, and then you need to deliver them at the end of each sprint, right? So you deliver, so there's a product goal and there's a sprint goal. You try to deliver multiple sprint goals together will finally achieve the product goal. So the developers are self-managing. Like I mentioned earlier, this is our cross-functional team and they're self-managing. So we are not order takers. So we choose who, how, and what to work on. Moving on, a little bit brief about the Scrum framework itself, how it works. Like I mentioned earlier, it all starts with your product owner trying to talk to the executives or stakeholder committee and trying to understand the vision from them and also what's their goal, what are they trying to achieve, right? And then building the product backlog. So it all starts there. So the commitment here is your product goal itself. What we're trying to achieve is understand the product goal. What is it that we need to build, right? And then once the product backlog is ready, and also the product owner try to prioritize as the product backlog, because you could have 500 items in your product backlog. How do we know which is needed first, which is needed second? I'm going to cover this in detail later in the session, but just to give you a brief, so you product owner also ensures the backlog is prioritized here, because only then we will know which is most value and which is the least value, right? So the moment the sprint starts, so the first event is going to be sprint planning. And I'm going to take a step back here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what sprint itself is for someone who doesn't know about sprints. So sprints are the heartbeat of Scrum. So basically your ideas are turned into values here, right? It's a time-boxed iteration of a continuous development cycle. So they're usually somewhere between 1 and 4 weeks. And at the end of each sprint, an increment or multiple increments are created. So whenever I say increment, what I mean here is these are your done products, which are your potentially shippable items, right? Again, if you can just go and read some of my blogs there about what done products are, if you want to know what definition of done is. So for the benefit of time, I'm not getting into too many details in this session, but please feel free to go and check out my blogs. I have added enough details there as well. So now that we know a little bit about what sprint is, the first event is a sprint planning, right? So it initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint itself, right? So this plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. So it potentially addresses 3 questions. So the first one is, why is the sprint valuable? So this question, when we are trying to address, what we arrive is something called a sprint goal. Because we're trying to see, why are we even doing the sprint? What are we trying to achieve in the sprint? Why is it even valuable? Why should it even be there? So that's when we know what the sprint goal is. What is a small piece of goal we are trying to achieve to the final goal, which is the product goal, right? The second question that we try to address is, what can be done this sprint? So right now we know what our goal is. What can we achieve from that in the sprint, right? So the developers select the items to include in the current sprint. So you have a prioritized backlog. We start, picking up items. There are a few parameters again to consider, like velocity of your team or your capacity of your team. Like historically, how much have you delivered at each sprint? Again, it's from the same team, right? You're not comparing with a different team. So you have to take your own metrics for that. And what is the capacity of the team? Are there any vacations? Are there any holidays? Are there any out of office times from the team, right? Is anybody out for a longer time? All that is taken into consideration while we pick how much we can take for each sprint. And the third question we try to address during the sprint planning is, how will the chosen work get done? So we know what our sprint goal is. We know what we are going to pick up. How are we going to achieve this? So how this is done is the developers plan the work necessary and create the increment that meets the definition of done, right? So we do the task breakout. So we start looking at a user story. We say, okay, these needs for this user story to be achieved, I need this a task. So we break them down into logical tasks. And then what we say is we might need 6 hours, 8 hours to build this particular user story. So that kind of breakout happens during your sprint planning. So the next event, which pretty much happens every 24 hours, is the daily stand-up or the daily scrum, as it is called. It is to inspect the progress towards your sprint goal and to produce an actionable plan for the next 24 hours, right? Please don't treat this as a status meeting. It's one of the larger mistakes that we keep seeing again and again. What happens is someone goes into the room. It's more like I mentioned, we are not order takers. So don't go and question, hey, what have you done? What have you done? That's not how it should be, right? So the daily scrum itself helps promote your self-managing teams, which is actually the heart of agility and scrum. So we determine how to create the done improvement. We own the backlog, right? The sprint backlog itself. The aim is to inspect and adapt the sprint backlog together. So the main goal of the daily scrum meeting is to improve communication, to improve transparency, and identify any impediments quickly and promote quick decision making. So this is the main reason behind the daily stand-up being structured this way. So do not treat this as a status meeting. Always remember the teams are self-managing and are not order takers. Once we remember this, everything else happens much more smoothly. So say we are done with the daily stand-ups and we are keeping on progressing well and everything goes fine. The next ceremony that comes into play is the sprint review, right? The purpose of this sprint review is to inspect the outcome of the sprint and determine the future adaptation. So what happens is the Scrum team presents the result of their work to the key stakeholders. Some of you call these as demos as well. So basically you build some user story, you demonstrate this to your product owner and the larger stakeholder team, and then you gather feedback as well, right? So the progress towards the product goal is kind of assessed during your sprint review. Now, almost by the end of sprint review, once you've gathered feedback, if everything looks fine, the customer is happy about it, you already have your finished work. And there's one more ceremony that we try to do. This is called a sprint retrospective. The purpose of the retrospective is to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. If you remember, we were talking about the 3 pillars of Scrum being transparency, inspection, and adaptation, right? So what we do is the Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went with regards to, could be individuals, it could be tools, processes, any interactions you've had with another team, or even definition of done, right? So I'm going to take a quick step back and a little bit talk about definition of done, because I'm keeping on using this terminology. And if someone doesn't know what this is, these are like a set of guidelines or a set of standards that we put together to say we have user stories and we have acceptance criteria for the user stories, right? To say if a user story is ready or not. And then we also know across the project, across the different programs that we are doing, we also have something called as a definition of done. Say, for example, just to break it down so it's easy to understand, something like if you're doing a lot of heavy customization and coding, like your code review, your peer review becomes one of the standard that's to be set, right? Because if there are integrations, then if you want to do any kind of integration testing, right, all these becomes your definition of them. Demonstrating your user stories and getting that approved by your PO and stakeholder, that could be your definition of done. And things, basically these are the small little things, like if you have a test class coverage, you can put that in, and you're saying like there are no defects, all defects are tested, all the user stories are tested, passed, there are no failures, all the defects are closed. So only if all these conditions are achieved, your stories can be called done. And this is written in collaboration with our team, right? Because again, we keep getting better over experience. And for instance, that's why I'm saying like retrospective, if you feel a definition of done did not include something, and ideally it should have been included, because there's a lot of problems or there's a lot of things, like say, for example, you missed peer review as part of your definition of done. And you have realized that because a peer review is not happening, the quality of code or something is not going well, if there was a peer review, it would have been better listed in the definition of done. Then you go ahead and even say that in your retrospective meetings. So it's about everything. It's about individuals. If somebody did not respond to you quickly from an integration team, if something did not work well, all that is brought together in the retrospective team. So we discuss what went well, what could have gone better, and how we solved a problem if it had occurred, or how we did not solve a problem. All this is being listed here, and we're all transparent, we're all open about, and we tell our perspectives and thoughts. And the improvements are addressed as soon as possible. Now that we looked a little bit about Scrum itself, the roles and the framework, I'm going to talk a little bit about the real story when Salesforce as a company actually met Agile. So imagine like we're heading to a Dreamforce and there are no keynotes, no new product announcements, no innovation features available for the next year. We can't even imagine that happening in a Dreamforce, right? This almost happened to Salesforce in 2006. But they dodged that scenario by implementing a new workflow that changed the way they developed and delivered products. So what happened was by 2006, Salesforce had experienced phenomenal growth. They had more customers, more products, more revenue, and they were a much bigger company compared to when we started in 1999, right? And growth doesn't come pain-free. Things were not easier anymore, and there was slowdown in innovation, scaling communication, collaboration, and management, all while they were trying to meet the release dates became much more challenging. That is when Salesforce took the risk and reinvented a way of delivering solution by adopting to the agile principles and practices. So most of the work Salesforce does is innovation based, and we're all well aware of it. And the final outcome is always not known upfront. And agile works like a charm for most of these teams. When I say that, I also want to say that some of the teams in Salesforce still operate on Waterfall, where the outcomes are clearly known upfront. You remember I kept mentioning that no one size fits all. Some programs can run good in Waterfall, some programs can run good in Agile. So that's exactly what happens in Salesforce today. And when they adopted Agile, they started off with 150 people organized into small cross-functional teams working in a shorter iterations. I just wanted to tell you all this story when this really happened with Salesforce and how things changed when it met Agile. Now, moving on, I want to quickly talk to you all about how do you create good user stories? How do you prioritize and estimate them? And I'm going to talk this. I took this topic for a main reason. It's very important for all of us to know about this. It's not just the job of a product owner to create user stories. Though the product owner would be creating it, it's very important for all of us to know what is a good user story, right? How do you create good user stories? What it should contain and what it should not contain, right? It's very important for each and every one of us to understand this. So a good user story typically fits in something that we call as an INVEST criteria. The acronym stands for independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. So what I mean by independent is the stories that we create should be independent as far as possible, right? Don't create stories with too much dependency. What could happen is you will not be able to deliver them. Say, for example, my user story 3 is dependent on 1 and 2. Then to realize the value in the third user story, I am dependent on 2 other user story to be delivered. So try to keep them as independent as possible. If you cannot, it is fine, but just see if it can be made independent. The N is negotiable, right? So the story should be discussable further. It should never be a dead end. We should have room for negotiation. There should be a room where we all can understand the story. We are able to talk through it, and we are able to understand and negotiate through it. The V in the INVEST stands for valuable. So all that you're trying to do is create value, right? Value for the business, value for the customer. So it means the stories that we create should add value to the customer. If something is not valuable, probably it shouldn't be in your product backlog itself. E in INVEST stands for estimable, which means all of us in the Scrum team should be able to understand the user story well enough so that, one, we are able to estimate the story itself while we're grooming the backlog. 2, we are able to break the story down into different tasks and estimate each of these tasks while we do the sprint planning. So it's very important that the story that we create can be estimated. S in the invest stands for small. User stories generally, again, it's a very good recommendation. I urge everyone should follow this. Don't create big user stories. Keep them as small as possible so you're able to realize value sooner and faster. So T in invest stands for testable. So all the user stories that we create, it should be tested against the acceptance criteria, right? We need to say if a user story is ready, right? If it's working fine. So the only way to do that is to test your user stories, and acceptance criteria, it should be testable against that. So typically a user story contains 3 parts: summary, descriptions, and acceptance criteria. So summary is usually your user story name or your feature name. So it's usually used to distinguish your current user story from another user story. That's all, right? So keep it very crisp. Don't write your summary for like, 2 sentences or something like that. Keep it very crisp. Like I mentioned, it's to distinguish your story from another story. A tip that I have followed in my programs, and you could follow this if it works for your organization as well, is you could keep something like your feature name shortened in square brackets and then with a hyphen and your story summary. I'm going to take an example here so we are able to understand this much better. Say I'm working with a financial services or a banking client, and the customer tells me that, hey, you know what, I want to capture relationship levels of my accounts in Salesforce. So they have like platinum, they have gold, silver, bronze. They are the relationship levels, and they want to capture that against their customers. So this is a use case that we're talking about. I'm going to create a user story for this. So how do I give a summary? Say, for example, I have an account management feature already created, and this fits under that. So I'm going to put like, square brackets, ACCT hyphen management, MGMT, or something like a shortened version, which I keep consistent across the feature and the stories under it. And then I say the summary is going to be ability to capture account levels. That's all, right? I'm going to keep a crisp statement, which is going to be my summary. So that when I quickly look at this user story, I can identify what this user story is all about. The second and the main part of the user story is your description, which is going to carry your value statement itself. The description essentially contains 3 parts. So one is a persona. So we always start a user story like as a what user. So basically it's a role, right? It's not a generic. So never start your user story as a Salesforce user. Say as a, sales representatives or a marketing user or a marketing executive. It should be a specific role, because a Salesforce user, again, it's a common mistake a lot of us make, is we always start our story as a Salesforce user. It could mean different for different people. I might think it's sales rep. You might think it's a marketing executive. Someone else might think it's an account executive, right? So be specific when you define the persona. And then the second part of your description is your action. So as what user, I want to perform what action. So what is the action that the user is trying to perform? And so that benefit, the why part of your user story comes into play. Why is this? Why are we even doing this? What is the benefit out of this user story, right? So that is covered in your why part. Keep it very simple and concise, and focus only on what is important in your description. Don't add information that are not relevant for your user story. If something is not relevant, it shouldn't be there. Only focus on what is important. To pick up with the same example of your capturing your relationship levels, how can I write a user story description, right? I could say, as an account executive, which is my persona, I want the ability to capture the level which my account belongs to. That's my action, so that I can understand the relationship level which my customer belongs to. And one more piece of information I could add in the description is all the different values I want, right? My platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. So this becomes my user story description. The third part of your user story is acceptance criteria. So acceptance criteria is nothing but a set of conditions to be fulfilled. If you remember, I was saying your user story should be testable against the acceptance criteria. So this is what we go, these are the statements, testable statements we are going to write for this particular user story. And a typical tip that I give again is keep 3 to 5 acceptance criteria for a user story. If it goes beyond that, you may want to think if you can break the story into a smaller stories, because it's becoming bulkier. That's what it means, right? And acceptance criteria usually has 3 parts, very similar to our description. It has 3 parts. One is given. typically your initial condition, then the action itself, like when I do what, then part is your result what result should be obtained, right? So just to again give you for the same use case, say given that I'm an account executive, when I view my accounts, then I should be able to see the account levels which my customer belongs to. That could be one of my acceptance criteria. The same I could create for an update operation, saying that given that I'm an account executive, when I update my accounts, I should be able to update my account levels, right? Say, let us add a little bit more complexity to this use case. Say, for example, I want to do it only to my accounts, meaning if I'm the owner of the account, I should be able to update. If I'm not the owner, I should not be able to update. If this was the scenario, then I could add another acceptance criteria saying, given that I'm an account executive and not the owner of the account, then I should not be able to update the account levels in my accounts, right? So this could become your another acceptance criteria. So if you realized, these are a set of conditions that should be fulfilled for me to say my user story is ready, right? So moving on, I'm going to ask you again, this is a bit of an interaction piece where I want all your thoughts and inputs. What do you think are the key details that we would include in the description of a user story? If the user story is about a new field, basically you're trying to capture some new information in Salesforce. If that is the scenario, then what kind of details do you think should be covered in the description? Please go ahead and say what you feel in your chat window. Why, how, who will use the field, who required access and the data type, business scenarios, purpose of the field, the data type, awesome, field name and data type, profile access, required layout type, the purpose, name of the field type, and who can edit view, what, how to use and purpose, general explanation of the UC, impact due to new field value from external system, what is it for, help text, name and type of the field, whom it has to be visible, field name and data type. As a sales user, I want to add value in the new field so that I can keep information up to date. Awesome. Profiles. Wow. This is great. Thank you all. Thank you all again for all your inputs. I love how you're all thinking about this. And yeah, you pretty much covered it. So typically, if it's about new information being captured in Salesforce, we'll try to understand what the field is all about, right? The field label, how are we going to call this field? What is the field type? Is it just a text? It's a pick list? It's a formula? What it is? And the field position itself, what is the location? Where are we going to put this field? Under which section, which page, right? The screen page layout kind of information as well. If the field is required or read-only or editable, the FL is itself, the field level security. And if it was a little bit more complicated, say, for example, this is a new field, but also involves integration, then, if the data is coming from another system, then we need to include the source detail. If the value for this field is going to come from somewhere else, then that. And if there's any validation needed as well, right? If there is this field, there are some more validations that are required on this field, then most likely it's going to be another user story. Like I mentioned, keep it short, keep it simple. So if it has an integration piece, try to create another user story for it if possible. And also, if there are more validations involved, if you're sending the data to another system instead of just receiving it, all that should be broken down into smaller stories. But as you groom this particular user story, these are the kind of details that we would be looking for in the description. Another one for you all. Tell me what is the detail that you look in the description of the user story. If your story is about some business process or a workflow for your customer, what are the details that you would look for a business process or a workflow kind of a scenario? Business scenarios, the business value, condition on which the workflow should execute, automation to get XYZ done, what are the conditions, object, when to fire, scenario for the business process, how it will impact the business flow, validations, criteria, use case, anything more, and what will be done in the workflow and the actions, scenarios and conditional logic. Perfect. What's the business process? Who will it impact? The filter condition, the business case, teams involved, the flow of information, criteria and the expected output, the time-dependent action, output expected. Again, awesome. Thank you so much. And Abhishek, you wrote the story itself. Thank you for that. And yeah, pretty much like what you all covered. I'm just going to compile it together and add some more as well. So typically you look for a success pattern, a failure pattern. If there is any exceptions, then you try to look for the exception handling. How do we handle the exception? What triggers the process or the workflow itself? What are the actions needed? Again, if it's kind of a bigger workflow, then try to break them down into smaller user stories as possible. One last one before we proceed with the next slide. What is the kind of details that you would include in the description if your user story is about an approval process? So this is something that the customer wants to define the approval process. And what are you going to look for in the description of the user story? Approvers and conditions needed, the business process, approver details, the actions, object criteria and actions, entry criteria, auto submission, who can submit an approval request and who can approve it, levels of approval process, conditions and actions, order of approval, getting approval for the business process, who can submit what, who can approve, many stages of approval, unanimous or first approval, if condition is set, conditions for approval, the status object, who can approve, who can submit. Awesome. Again, thank you so much. Rejection criteria from Murli. Thank you for that. Yes, again, you all pretty much covered. Thank you all for engaging so much today. I mean, it definitely motivates me more. And just to summarize what you all said and adding a little bit of my inputs as well. So for approval process kind of a story, you're going to look at all scenarios that would trigger the approval itself and how it is expected to work. The approvers, if there are multiple levels of approvals, then we have to single step or multi-step. We need to cover that as well as the group. And how are they notified? And if there is any SLA for approval, then we probably need to handle that as well. Is there any auto approvals needed? And like you all mentioned, any rejection scenario that we need to take care of, then all that needs to be covered as part of your description of your user story, right? And like I mentioned, if it becomes larger, if there are multiple levels of approvals, try to see if you can break the user story down into smaller logical user stories. Thank you all so much for all your inputs. I'm going to move on to our next slide. I'm going to give you a quick example of a full user story. We talked about this in brief, just to summarize it. So typically your summary is where you give a crisp statement. Like for instance, here we're trying to capture region and opportunities. It belongs to a feature called sales process. So I've given sales process, capture region on opportunities. And there's a description where I'm actually giving the full value statement, right? So as a sales representative, I want the ability to capture the region of my opportunities so that I can view and manage my opportunities by region. And I've also included what are the different regions that needs to be part of this. We have acceptance criteria, which is your testable statements. And we have a couple of acceptance criteria here. So given that I'm a sales rep, when I view my opportunities, I should be able to see the region to which opportunities belong to. Given that I'm a sales rep and I edit my opportunities, I should be able to update the region on my opportunity, right? So this is how typically you would create a user story. Moving on, say for example, we are the product owners. We've already created our user stories. Now we have to prioritize them. It's another very important task, right? So when we prioritize user stories, there are a few considerations that we have in mind, and we need to consider these for sure when we prioritize our user stories. So mostly this is again an activity done by the product owner in collaboration with the business stakeholders and the executive team who are in charge of your user stories. And one of the key things that we consider is the business value. How much value is your user story adding to the business, right? That's one of the key considerations that we have while we prioritize. The higher the business value, most likely the priority is going to be high. The lower it is, it's going to be on the lower side, right? There are also other things that we consider while we prioritize user story. Another one is a dependency, right? Do we have any relationship with another product backlog item? Is this story dependent on another story? Should another story go first in order for the current story to be built? So that kind of dependency is also considered in prioritization, right? Because if something else needs to be done, then probably that's just more priority than the current one. And then another thing that we consider is the solution approach and risk. So when I say solution approach, it's any prerequisite or dependencies that we should take care of. I've given this example as well in the past. So, this is a real thing that happened in one of my programs. So it was a fresh Salesforce implementation, and they were trying to do this customer service optimization in their program. And we had a fresh Service Cloud implementation happening from Salesforce side. So what was happening is for the customer, the first and foremost priority was the case management. So the stories that were under case management was of more priorities compared to the others. But then we realized that, and then we educated again from a Salesforce perspective to the customer that probably we need to do the org setup, which is more valuable. Though it's not directly adding value to your business because you're wanting case management first, but we need to do org setup. We need to set up profiles, the roles, the whole org setup itself, right? Because in the long run, this is going to help as we build more and more features. So once the customer was educated on this and they said, oh yeah, we would definitely love that. We didn't know Salesforce had such a thing. So we're pretty excited to do that. We can prioritize that first because it's going to indirectly add more value to my other features. So then what happened? Case management, which was a top priority feature, became the second one, and org setup became the first one. So this is just to give you an example of how these considerations can change decisions of prioritization, right? So say, for example, we have considered all the 4 factors that I have mentioned here for our user stories. Then what do is we categorize user stories and we put them in one of these 4 buckets, right? And we call it as a Moscow analysis. So it's like a must have, should have, could have, or won't have, right? So these are the 4 buckets. And then we're going to put user story into one of these buckets. How do we do that? So when a user story is a must have, right? If an user story is absolutely essential, it's of high business value, it's totally a non-negotiable item for the customer, and it's critical for their success, then probably your user story should get into a must-have bucket, right? And if your user story is important, but it's not absolutely essential, but it is definitely of high priority, then it should get into should have. Say, for example, you have a user story, which is like a nice to have story, and it has value. It is a desirable feature, but it's not like essential. It's more like nice to have. Then it gets into a could have. If, for instance, your user story, it's not so important for a particular release and it can be implemented later, then it will get into won't have, because you don't want it at this time, but you would like it in the future, right? So you consider all these 4 key considerations that I've talked about, and then you put them into one of these 4 buckets. And that's how the prioritization happens. Moving on to user story estimation. Again, I'm going to cover the story estimation here, not the task estimation. Just to give you a little bit of background, user story estimation happens during the backlog grooming. So the product owner explains the user stories to the developers, and then the team, the developers, actually go ahead and say how much user story each of these stories are going to be, right? So when I discuss, if I'm the product owner, I'm going to explain you what the story is all about. You ask me all your questions. I'm going to clarify all your questions from the details I know. If I don't know, then I go get the information and I come back. So once all your questions are clarified, you understood the goal of the story fully, then what we do is something called as a story estimation. So you come and tell each of you individually, do a story point estimation and say, hey, I think this story is going to be 3 story points. This is going to be 1 story point. This is going to be 5. Each of you could have same or different numbers, and we will finally kind of discuss through why you said 3 or 5 or 1 to understand different perspectives and thought that have gone ahead. And then we come to a consensus. So this is how the overall process works. So the technique that we follow is something that we call as relative sizing. So what it means is, so if someone asks us to go and size something without giving us any clue, right, we might most likely not know how to size it. But if someone tells us, hey, this is the smallest work that you've ever done before, size in comparison to this, then it is much more easier for us. For example, as a team, if the smallest story we have ever done before is doing a field label change. So there was this field in one page layout. The label had to be made different. We no longer call the field by that name. So we're going to change the name. That's the smallest story ever we have done. We pick that as our base story. Again, pick a base story only what you have done in the past. When I say you as a team, I mean, if some other team has done something else, don't pick a base story from that, because that's not something our team has worked on, right? So pick something that we have worked on so that we are able to, we know the full details of it because we're fully worked on it. We have full knowledge and understanding about that user story. So we can relatively size in all aspects, right? So that's your first and foremost step, to pick your base story. And then we try to size it in relation to that base story, considering few of these points that I've mentioned here. One is the complexity. So how functionally or technically complex is your current user story in relationship to your base story, right? Does it have more complexity? Does it have more functional complexity or technical complexity? Then that should be one of your key considerations while you size your story. The second thing, which is also very important, is the magnitude of work. So when I say magnitude of work, I mean the amount of effort involved, and we should not consider time. Don't consider number of hours needed to implement the story. And I'm going to take a minute and tell you why. So while we're actually estimating user stories, we are at the backlog grooming stage, right? We are not started the sprint. We don't even know which sprint the story is going to be picked up. And we also don't know who is possibly going to work on this particular user story. Say, for example, I am a junior developer. I don't have too much of development experience. User story build might take like 4 hours for me. If Sushant is a senior developer and he has more expertise, and he could do it in 2 hours. And if Divya has more, she has been in this organization and the program for a long time. She has a better understanding of the system. So for her, she could do it in like half an hour, right? It is quite possible because we all have different expertise, different skill sets. So what is happening here is it is basically the ideal time by an ideal person, right? It's not like the time is very relative. Who picks up is how the task is going to be estimated. That is why while you're estimating your story, you should not consider the number of hours you will take to complete the work. Instead, consider the magnitude of work, how big an effort it is. Is it more medium effort? Is it larger effort? Is it how much bigger the effort itself is going to be? And then there are a few other things that we need to consider. If there's any risk, if there's any dependencies or uncertainties. For example, you're working with another integration team for a particular user story. You're dependent on them to give you some data. You're dependent on them to build some API. So there is that kind of dependency there. And if it's something that you've never done before, if you've never worked on an integration with such kind of a system, or you're not really sure how the work itself is going to be, then all that should be considered while you're doing your story estimation. And the estimation values, if you're at the very primitive stage of the project, you do something called as a t-shirt sizing. You say like extra small, small, medium, large, like that. And then if you're a little bit more mature, then Fibonacci series is being used in the more matured phase of your projects, where you will say like it's 1 story point, 2 story points, 3 and 5. So again, you keep hearing this USP, it stands for user story points. Here are some quick tips while you do user story estimations. Like I mentioned, first and foremost, understand the user story fully. Ask questions. It's very important because you never know who's going to work on it. It might be even you or someone else, but it doesn't matter. Ask questions based on your experience. Anything that you don't shy away from questions, just ask them because you need information in order to build them, right? Identify your base story. Again, pick something that your team has done in the past. Do not pick from a different team. Relatively size the stories in your backlog based on this user story. Compare it with your base story, and then you relatively size your stories. Always ensure you reach consensus among team. Like I mentioned, people could say different story points, right? And this has happened so many times in my projects as well. So if there's a user story, someone will tell it's 3, someone will feel it's 5, someone will feel it's like just 2. then what we do is we don't go and say, okay, let's log the lowest number or the highest number, or let's average it. We never do that. That's not the best practice. We need to understand why the person estimated it as 2 or 3 or 5. So we ask questions like, why did you say it's 2? What was your perspective? What was your thought? Then the person will come up and say, hey, we have done something very similar in the past, and I don't think it's that complex compared to that. And say a person with a 5-story could say like, no, this involves a bit of integration. There's a bit of dependency involved here. There's some risk as well. So probably it needs to be considered, and we should probably size it at 5. So then what might happen is there are some healthy discussions. We heard different perspectives, and then we ask questions if we have any more questions, and then we regroup, and then we again try to resize the story and then arrive at consensus among the team. And again, a tip from my side, if you have a user story which is very big, if it's greater than 8 story points, then please break it down into smaller user stories as possible. And just to make you visualize this estimation, I've just given a small visual here. So if your field label change is your smallest user story, then probably your field creation is going to be a slightly bigger story than your field label change, right? Because it's not as simple as your field label change, but it could be a little bit more complex, a little bit more effort involved. So, that kind of a scenario. So your field creation is slightly bigger. In compared to your field label change, a field creation involving integration with other system could be a much bigger effort, right? Much bigger complexity. It's a like bigger story because there is an integration involved. Either you're getting data from another system, or you're pushing data to another system. There's some integration piece as well. While your approval process, if there's a multi-step approval process, that is going to be quite larger in comparison to your field label change, be it complexity, be it the magnitude of work, or be it any dependencies or risks that could be involved, right? So just to give you a visualization of how the estimations could work. All right, with that, we almost come to the end of this session. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourselves and ask, or you could drop it in the chat window. But like I mentioned, for the benefit of time, I was not able to cover too much of nitty-gritty details. So please feel free to jump into Salesforce Couple website, and you would see some basic blogs as well there. And there is more coming your way in the coming weeks. Any questions?
Yes, so we have one question from Kapil. What's the value of a burn down and up chart in Scrum?
Yeah, so it's these charts are typically used to track the progress of the project itself, right? So how much work is remaining to be done in the project? That's what your burn down chart says, and your burn up chart typically shows how much work has been completed, and what's the total amount of work that's being there as part of your sprint. So it's more to usually these are part of your tools. If you're using Jira or Trello or any other Microsoft TFS or RTC, whatever agile tools that you're using, these are usually built there. So it's basically for us to visualize and track the progress that we are making through the sprints.
Yeah, so one question from Rashmi. Do base story consideration changes every sprint?
Yeah, it could change, right? Because say, for example, my field label change was my base story so far, but there is some other story that that comes up in this sprint, which became even smaller than that, and so that is the smallest story that we have ever built, right? Because right now we are building this, so the next sprint that will become my base story, because that's the smallest that we've ever built. So yes, it could change if that's your smallest work you've ever done.
Okay. One question from Sudarshan: can we include multiple personas in a single user story?
I would definitely not recommend that. I would say keep it different, because you can deliver sooner and faster, like I mentioned. So if it's something that you can logically break, please break it into smaller stories. So keep it different, because it will be multiple smaller stories, that's all right, but something gets built faster. Maybe it's a feature that is very important for your sales representatives first, let that get in and get it delivered first, and later you can do the same thing for your, your sales managers or something. If it's not critical, it can wait. So keep it as small as possible. The goal here is we want to deliver value sooner and faster. Always keep that in mind. So keep them as smaller as you can.
Yeah. One question from Vinay. Can we perform project management in Salesforce?
I'm assuming this is not a very agile specific question, but yes, you can. There is project management in Salesforce. I mean, every project needs some kind of management, but if you're an agile, you're lucky. You're having self-managing teams, so there is not much of management needed. As long as you have a Scrum Master, your product owner, and the developers team, you don't really need to manage. Everything is being self-managed there.
Yeah, and just want to add on this. So if your company is having any DevOps tool integrated with Salesforce, like Pardot, these DevOps tools will provide your integration with your Jira, the tool if you are using. Through that you can sync your Jira board with your within your Salesforce, and from there you can manage your projects. So that's another way you can do project management in Salesforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you one question from Pawan Kumar? Can you quickly tell about a sprint retrospective, like what is done in short detail?
Oh yeah, sure. So retrospective is where all of us, like if you're all working on a same, sprint, right? We all come together and as a team, and then we all talk about what went. So we talk about few things. So one, what went well. So it could be with relation to people or the process or your definition of done. It could be anything, any interactions, communications we've had. So we try to say what we all, each of us come and talk about it, right? So there are different tools and games that are being involved in retrospective, but just to put you in a very simple nutshell, so we talk about what went well, we talk about what could have gone better, meaning if something did not go well, we had some problems with, like, say you're working with another team, you did not get data on time, you did not get the information on time, those kind of things, or your tool was not acting well, your tool was down for a couple of days and that caused problem. So anything that did not go well, and when we say something did not go well, we also try to see how can it be done better, right? So is there anything that we could have done to solve the problem, or if we've already done to solve a problem, then we talk about that as well. So at the end of retrospective, sometimes what we have something called actionable items. So we have to solve some problems so that it doesn't happen again in the next sprint. So we need to ensure there is a plan for that as well, and we need to quickly implement it because there is not too much time. So for instance, if you're having an integration team, you're facing some hiccups because there's usually a delay from them, then the Scrum Master needs to ensure that the integration team understands how critical the success of the sprint is, how the goal is, and they need to ensure there's a dedicated resource or a person who is basically responsible for giving us the information that we need on time. That's a quick example. So all this happens in retrospective. So technically we inspect and we adapt. So we inspect from the last sprint and we adapt. Right, that's what we do in the sprint retrospective.
Right. So what we usually do in our companies, like we have some online tools which something related to Kanban board, and over there we will create three categories, like what to do, what should not to do, and what we will do in future. And we will give access to that board to each and every team member, including BAs and all the developers and testers as well, and they will put their points over there, and in retrospective we will discuss all the points, and we will allow everyone to share their thoughts, whatever they have suggested. So through that it will be a collaborative session, and there you will get to know what we have do wrong and how we can correct them, or what are the things we should do in future sprints in order to make our sprints more productive. So yeah, this is really one of the good ceremonies in this Scrum.
Yes, absolutely right. I mean, that's a really great way of doing it, and like customers do. I mean, people do it differently. Again, there are different games to keep ourselves engaged, and somebody is
Mhm.
starting new and agile. Like people are not so much willing to come forward and talk because all of us are hesitant to talk when we know we are going to be judged by it. So stop thinking that. That's why I said it's very important for the success of any agile project that we are transparent and we are able to freely communicate and collaborate, right? Every event from start till end, there is constant communication and collaborations needed. So like I said, one of the main pillars of the Scrum itself is transparency. So it makes a big deal when we have mutual respect for each other. We trust each other. Then we are more free to share everything with each other. We don't feel judged, right? That's when people really refrain from sharing what they feel. So it's very important to have that inclusive feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. One question from Sneha. Do we calculate velocity for a sprint or a team?
Yes. So velocity is for your team, the same team, not even like a different team, right? It's your same team. So how much you have been able to deliver in the past with the same team, assuming you have the same skill set, the same number of people, then over the last few sprints, you would have been, say, for example, you delivered 30 story points on an average. Like some could be 28, some could be 32, some could be 30, but on an average, if you have delivered 30 story points, then that's what becomes your velocity. Again, like I mentioned, I just want to reiterate, it's for your same team. If people have changed, like if the skill set have changed, then that velocity will not matter now because it's totally a different composition, right? So as a team, how much we have delivered in the past on an average is what is your velocity, assuming your sprint length is also same. I just want to add that because usually if it's like a 2-week sprint and then now suddenly, usually it doesn't happen that often. I'm just saying, in case your sprint length changes or your team composition changes or your team itself changes, then velocity will be different, obviously.
Yeah, one good question from Ram. Can we increase the sprint scope when unforeseen issues arises?
Increase sprint scope, meaning if you are asked, I'm assuming you're asking me if you can add or deliver more stories, which is what I'm assuming when you say increase sprint scope. But yeah, so say for example, based on my velocity, our team's velocity, we have picked 30 user story point worth of stories, but we actually have 2 more days for the sprint to end and there is time for us to build something, then we can definitely take some user story and deliver that as well. But always remember, again, I'm saying this because this is again a common mistake that happens in a lot of places. When you pick something, ensure a few things. One, it doesn't break anything that you've already built, because you don't want to take it at the very end of the sprint, like 2 days before your sprint ends, and build something and deploy it. And finally, if it's going to break something that you've already built, it's going to cause more damage. So try to analyze all that. What is the impact it's going to create? If there is any risk involved in picking up that story. If it's something as small as, like, for example, like I mentioned, a field label change or something that's very independent, it's very standalone thing, it will not touch anything else, and you're very sure about it, and you have the time needed for it and the skill set needed for it, then you can always go ahead and pick something. On another scenario, say for example, you've picked something like a 30 user story point worth of stories, but there's something unforeseen happened. There was some risk. Your integration team, the core person you were working with, for example, is out on an emergency, right? It could happen to anybody, and there is no one else who could share the bandwidth. So because of which you're stuck with this user story, you're not able to work on it. Then what might happen is we spill it, that user story gets spilled over and picked up probably in the next sprint or the future sprint based on when the person is going to be available, if it's still your higher priority and all that, right? So that also happens. So both these scenarios can happen.
Actually, we have more questions, but I think we are running out of time. So sorry, guys, we won't take all the questions today. But yeah,
No worries.
definitely you can connect with Sudha after this session as well. And also, if you visit their salesforcecouple.com, so I think most of your answers you already automatically get from there. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, please feel free to ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have more questions. Like Sushant mentioned, also the website has quite a few basic blogs which covers more details. So in case you're interested, you can go visit that as well.
All right, guys. So we have 6 minutes left. So we already running out of time. So I'm just quickly share my screen to have our covered quiz. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen now. Hope you can see now.
Yep.
Cool.
I think someone with the Power Condor and the Kahoot should rename themselves.
Yes, so guys, please use your real name so that it will become easy for us to identify you.
Even Cheerful Dingo, please rename yourself.
So I can see we have 84 participants in this session, and apart from 62 joined. Again, I would suggest people to use their official names. I can see few people's having a name like Cheerful Dingo 99. Someone using maybe their roll numbers 8842 535. I don't know. Power Condor 17. So guys, please request you to please change your name. All right, so we will wait for one more minute, and then I will log this Kahoot quiz and we'll start with that.
If you aren't able to find the game pin, you can find it on the screen. That is 8842 535. Please use the pin to get into the quiz.
So guys, you have to visit www.kahoot.it, and over there it will ask for a game pin. So this is your game pin for this quiz 8842 535, and then you can join. I guess 90% people already joined, and I also see the numbers are stable now. So I think we can start. Good luck, guys. All right, so now this quiz is locked, and let's start. Which of the following is not an agile methodology framework? The answer is Scrum of Scrums. Okay. Sudha ma'am, what is lean?
Yeah, so these are all the different frameworks. Like we have Scrum, we have Lean, again, Kanban, like I
Okay.
mentioned, Crystal framework, so Safe. They're all different frameworks in Agile. I actually mentioned it in our initial slides before I started about Scrum. So Scrum of Scrums is more like a ceremony, right? So we have different Scrum teams, then you do another exercise because all of us will be touching on the same user stories. So then there could be some, what I build versus what another team builds could have an impact. Then we do something called as a Scrum of Scrums to discuss what we are all touching together and what impacts it could create.
So in Scrum, usually the Scrum Master from different team will join, right?
Yes, you're right. And then we also have, so there are some different people also who also join as part of the team, who will be able to talk about the technicalities as well, if there is anything that is, interlocked in there. For instance, you're touching the same opportunities object, and both of us are going to work on the same opportunity process. And for some reasons, two different teams are working on it, and it could have an impact. Then we discuss that as well as part of Scrum of Scrums.
Right.
Yeah, it's not, that's the only thing on the board, which is not the framework.
Okay. Yeah. All right, guys. So let's see the board. Mohan is on top, Sunita on second, and V Lakshmi is on third. Next question. Which of these ceremonies happens at the start of the sprint? Yeah. 45 people answer correctly. Sprint planning. All right, so let's see the podium again. Sunita moved to first, Mohan on second, and V Lakshman on third. Third question. Yes. Most of the people answer correctly. It's good to see. All right, so Mohan again move back to first, and Sunita's on second. Rest is same. Sharnavi on fourth, and Srinivas Reddy is on fifth. So you also have chance because we have 3 more questions left. So good luck, guys. Fourth question: which of these one of the 3 Scrum pillars? Flexibility, openness, courage, and transparency. Transparency. So no change on the board after this question. Next question. What should not be considered for story point estimation? Uncertainties, dependencies, time, and complexity. Time. Okay, 35 people answer correctly. Let's see the results. We have a new participant in top 5, Sudarshan. Second last question, guys. E in the invest criteria stands for estimable. 48 people answer correctly. Okay, no change on first, second. Last question, guys. Good luck. Which section of the story contains the value statement? So on third, we have V. Lakshmi, and Sunita is on second. The certification voucher winner is K. Mohan Kumaran. So congratulations, Mohan, for winning Salesforce certification voucher. And from past few days, we are getting lots of questions related to how many vouchers you are distributing. So yeah, see, we have, I know today we have almost 100 people joined, and it's not fair for you because we are distributing only one certification voucher today. But guys, we are also bound with some restrictions because we all on every Saturday we have to do some sessions. So we have to manage all the things. So sorry for that, but definitely in future, uh, every Saturday you will get a chance to win certification voucher, and also you will get to learn something new what we did today. So I would like to thank Sudha ma'am for this valuable session, and because I also part of one of the Scrum team, so I can easily relate all the points what ma'am shared with us today. So it was really an interesting session for me, and I'm hoping the same for all of you guys. Also, you have enjoyed this session a lot today. So thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your knowledge with us. And we are also looking for the same sessions in future as well.
Thank you so much, Sushant, for having me. And thank you all to all your volunteers and your entire team. You've been doing a great job, like I mentioned earlier. And thank you all for who participated. I mean, it was such an engaging session with so many people sharing their perspectives and thought. I think that's what made this session even more special. So thank you for each and every one of you who took your time on a weekend to come and learn here and also share your perspectives and thought freely with us. Thank you so much for being such an engaging audience.
Yeah, thank you. And Divya, would you like to close the session with the last comments?
Yeah, thank you all for joining. And Sudha ma'am, it's a pleasure. You have hosted this session. And we are very glad that for your session, we had almost like 100 participants. So we are happy for that. And the attendees were also quite active. And thank you so much all for attending this session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I would request our winner, Mohan Kumaran, to share your details with us. And rest of you have a great weekend ahead. Stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy your time with your families. Thank you all.
Why are people joining now after the end of me?
Okay, so we are good. I have noted down Mohan's email ID. So we are good to wrap up this session.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Divya. Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.